Chapter 1. Seventh grade has actually been pretty awesome until today, when only 3 days left before summer vacation, things took a turn for the worse. I have stayed on the Warrior Kid path for almost 3 years now. I am stronger and faster and do better in school than most other kids. I have some pretty good friends. Kenny Williamson, who used to be a bully, now hangs around with me a bunch. So does Nathan James, a kid that I used to think was super annoying. Now we are all good friends, and they are all on the path of being warrior kids. Nathan started jujitsu with me last summer, and at the beginning of this school year, Kenny started training jujitsu too. We have all kinds of fun all the time, and these guys pretty much look up to me. I was I was just I was a leader, just like my Uncle Jake told me I would be. I like being a leader, and I felt like I was a leader until today, because today was the day that Danny Reinhardt arrived at my school. First of all, who shows up to school with only 3 days left? I get that he just moved here, but still, it's just silly. Why would someone do that? Anyway, he ended up coming into our homeroom with Mr. Oglethorpe. Never stopped smiling. Fancy sneakers, super nice clothes, big wavy hands, and big wavy hair. Now, Danny seemed really nice when I first met him. He was all smiles and super polite to everyone, maybe a little too nice. He was actually pretty tall too, maybe a couple inches taller than me. He ended up getting put at our table because Jennifer Garston went with her parents to Minnesota for the summer and left school a few days early. Because he was only around for the last 3 days of school, Mr. Oglethorpe asked if Danny could just kind of stay with me for the day. So we finished homeroom and then went to math. Because school was almost over, we were just doing some games in math. We had to see who could finish problems the quickest and knew the most math facts. Even though Danny was new to our class, he did really well, really well. He knew the answers to just about every question. His hand would shoot up every time the teacher asked any question at all. Since Danny has all the answers, we might as well go home. And of course, the teacher would call on him, probably because he was the new guy, and the teacher was trying to be nice. And the whole time, Danny had this big smile on his face, a really big smile, a smile so big that it was kind of annoying. Then we went out to recess, and Danny was with me. I figured it was time to see what Danny was really made of. So I took him over to the pull-up bar with Kenny and Nathan. We like to do pull-ups, I told Danny. Get some, Kenny. And with that, Kenny jumped up on the bar and knocked out 14 straight pull-ups. That was pretty good and more than Kenny used to be able to do. Then Nathan hopped up on the bar and he rattled off 16 pull-ups in a row. That was impressive. Finally, it was my turn. I was pretty darn good at pull-ups, so I jumped up and knocked out a solid 26 pull-ups in a row. Not my best, but still decent, and a heck of a lot better than Nathan and Kenny. Nice, Kenny shouted when I finished. Strong work, Mark, Nathan added. I would have did 27, but didn't want to show off. I looked over at Danny and I thought he might be intimidated by all this, but he didn't look intimidated at all. Maybe that's because he didn't realize I was about to call on him and ask him to do pull-ups. I wanted him to I wanted him to see that even though he was good at math, there were other things in the world to be good at besides knowing math facts and how to figure out problems. Then he asked, "Do you mind if I have a go?" That happened, that kind of surprised me. And he had a big smile on his face like he was going to enjoy it. "Sure," I told him, "go ahead." With that, Danny jumped up on the bar and immediately did a pull-up, then another one, then another one, and another, and another. I was counting in my head. When he got to 20, Nathan started counting out loud. 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27. "That's more than you, Mark," Nathan shouted. But Danny didn't stop. He kept going and going and finally got to 32, and he finally struggled on the last one. Came up short and then dropped off the bar. 32, Kenny shouted. "That's a new record." "Awesome work, Danny." "Isn't that awesome, Mark?" Nathan added, looking at me. I didn't really know what to say. I hadn't even done my maximum number. I could have done a few more, but I didn't, and now my friends thought Danny was awesome. "Yeah," I finally replied, "awesome." "It's no big deal," Danny said. "I had a pull-up bar at my house, so I did them a bunch. I'm sure you could have done a few more if you had to." Sheesh, why would he even say something like that? He had certainly clearly beaten me, and now he was saying it wasn't a big deal. Maybe he was just trying to make me feel worse by making it seem like it was no big deal. "What kind of pull-ups workouts do you do?" Nathan asked. But he wasn't asking me, he was asking Danny. "Well, Danny replied, "just basic stuff. I jump on the bar and do a bunch of pull-ups, then do that a bunch of times. It's nothing crazy." Nothing crazy? Here, I had been working on pull-ups for 3 years, and I still got beat. It was crazy. It was driving me crazy. That was when I realized that Danny was probably one of those people that was just naturally good at pull-ups. My Uncle Jake had told me about people like that. People that were just naturally good at something. So he probably didn't have to work hard at it at all. It was probably just easy for him. But there were other things I was sure I could beat Danny at. At least I thought there would be. At the end of the school year, we have one day called Field Day. It is fun, at least. It is now that I do better at all the events. I have even won some of them. This is a long way from where I was in the 5th grade when I couldn't do a single pull-up. That was the summer that Uncle Jake came and taught me how to work out, how to eat healthy, how to study, how to swim, even got me started in jiu-jitsu so I wouldn't get bullied by Kenny Williamson, who became my friend after I stood up to him. Last year, I did pretty well at just about every event. The only one I wasn't very good at was bobbing for apples. I just couldn't get my mouth around the apple because it wouldn't stay still in the water. You'd think one would at least stick to a tooth or something. But I did well in pull-ups, push-ups, sit-ups, burpees, and the 1 mile run. In fact, I won all pull-ups, sit-ups, and burpees for my class. Tony Hale won the push-ups, and I think because his arms are so short. And Iris beat me in the 1 mile run and won first place because she runs competitively and trains all the time. But field day was still a great time, and I had a ton of fun. This year was different, very different. And I bet you can guess why. Danny Reinhardt. He won just about every event. He beat me in pull-ups, sit-ups, and burpees. Tony still won push-ups though. I did 31 pull-ups and Danny did 37. I did 107 sit-ups and Danny did 131. I did 36 burpees in 2 minutes and Danny did 42. And every time he would win something, Danny would just act like it was no big deal. He would smile and shrug it off, like winning was so easy for him. Wins come and wins go, no big deal. But when it got to the mile run, I figured I could take him, even win first place, since Iris had broken her ankle in the spring and still wasn't allowed to run. So since I got second last year, I figured with Iris out of the race, it was mine for the taking. You couldn't beat me in a race if I had 2 broken ankles, Mark. My class and Mr. Blackwell's class lined up for the race. The PE teacher, Mr. Sadowski, then looked at us and said, "On your mark, get set, go." I sprang off the line and started to run hard. I wanted to get away from the rest of the kids and be out there on my own, away from the rest of the pack. In a race, the slower kids slowed me down if they were ahead of me. Not this time. I sprinted hard and got ahead of the pack. It didn't take long before I was in the lead, out in front of everyone on my own. Once out in front, I didn't even look back. Uncle Jake told me when racing, if you look back, you lose time and momentum. So I just kept charging ahead at a solid speed. But being in first place wasn't enough. I wanted to make sure I not only beat Danny, but crushed him. So I ran really hard, really hard. Then, as I rounded one of the corners, I noticed someone just a bit behind me. And of course, it was Danny. So I ran a little harder. It was a long straightaway, so I just tried to run even harder. But I was already out of breath. I had to slow down just a little bit, but I thought I was far enough ahead of Danny to beat him. As I slowed, I kinda got my breath back, but I was still hurting. Now, as I continued down the straightaway, I couldn't tell where Danny was without looking, and I needed to know. So despite what Uncle Jake had taught me, I turned my head and looked behind me to see where Danny was. I saw him, and he was gaining on me. That's right, despite how hard I was running, Danny was running even faster. I couldn't believe it, so I tried to pick up my pace a little more, but I just couldn't. My lungs were already burning. But Danny wasn't slowing down. He was just getting closer and closer to me. I could hear him breathing, and he was breathing hard, even harder than me. I started to get mad. Mad that he was beating me, not just at this race, but at everything. So I decided I would try to run harder, so I could stay ahead of him. We didn't have that much further to go, so I stepped it up, but it wasn't enough. Moments later, Danny was right next to me. He was breathing like crazy. I looked at him from the corner of my eye, and he looked like he was going to die. If I could just hold on a little longer, I thought he might break. But he didn't. He kept straining and breathing and fighting, and I just couldn't keep running so fast. My lungs just couldn't take it anymore. So I backed off and I let it go. As soon as I did, Danny pulled ahead of me, not just by a little bit either. No, as I slowed down, he actually sped up and started running even faster. I couldn't believe it, especially because there was no way I could run any harder, but Danny could. So I kept running, and I came in second place. When I got across the finish line, I looked at Danny, but I couldn't see him. Then I saw a crowd of people from the other classes looking at something. I walked over and saw Danny. He was lying on the ground, completely exhausted. I was tired, but not as tired as he was, and honestly, it felt pretty good seeing him there on the ground like that, because I knew he was way more tired than I was, which made me feel kinda like I had won. But the crowd didn't think so. They were all telling him, "Great job," and "Nice race." No one said anything to me. When Nathan and Kenny finished the race, they asked if I had won. No, Danny Rideout won, I answered as pointed to him lying on the ground, wanting them to see that he was more tired than I was. And as soon as I said that, they ran over to see him and to tell him he did a good job. That feeling that I had that I kinda won started slipping away, and I realized that Danny had beaten me again, and I didn't like it.